So, hello everyone. Again, I'm Dr. Maggie Trela from the Department of Immunology and Inflammation at Imperial College London. And this morning, I'm going to give you a brief overview of an activity called an interactive mind map that we introduced in our program with Dr. Sophie Rutschman a couple of years ago, and which proved to be really helpful for creating bonds among new learners. A mind map, really, as you can see here, is a diagram with a central theme used to visually organize new and related ideas which radiate out from the center, showing relationships among pieces of the whole, a bit like a spider web where everything is interconnected. And by focusing on key ideas written down in learners' own words and looking for relationships between them, learners can map knowledge in a way that will help them to better understand and retain information. And why did we come up with this idea, really? We decided to use the idea of mind mapping as an introductory activity at the start of our program, with the hope that this would help our students bond right from the very start of the course. We know that this is essential for effective community building and the sense of belonging, particularly during an induction program. And unlike in an icebreaker activity where students typically learn some personal information about each other, here students have the opportunity to get to know their peers by using their newly acquired knowledge within their group in a safe space. This way, they start laying foundations for future peer learning and grow together as a team. As we can all appreciate, students' attitude has a pretty big impact on their overall learning journey. So developing rapport and bonds among peers early on can help create a positive atmosphere and, so to speak, mutual respect, which actually encourage their participation in activities. This is very much based on the idea of the formation of a social context and team building, which are rather essential for collaborative learning. And most of us would have probably observed in our own practice, students' respect for their tutors and their opinions tends to be a bit more apparent than for their fellow classmates. That's why this idea of a collaborative mind map has been particularly helpful in the learner-to-learner context. It really has been developed to maximize their bonding and encourage student-led learning and foster team discussions, which ultimately builds that sense of fellowship. And on top of that, learners get to visually organize their activity-related ideas and notice these connections between different concepts and therefore the so-called bigger picture. So how could others implement this idea? This is probably one of many ways and variations in which this idea can be put into practice. And this activity works perfectly in online and face-to-face sessions. On our program, we divide our class into groups of 5 to 6 students and provide the reading material in the form of an article, for example. We allocate different themes, which are included in the article, to individual student groups. They also have access to an editable interactive mind map where, having worked with their article section, they can note down some key points which will be presented by their group speaker. And then feedback is provided by the tutor towards the end of the activity, and you can find many different free mind mapping tools online. I included a few examples here. All right, so let's give it a go. We put together this activity for you, which hopefully will be quite interesting, regardless of your area of expertise, and it will revolve around the concept of boosting our natural defenses. So you will be automatically sent to one of the 10 individual breakout rooms. I appreciate we might have some breakout rooms where only one person will be working on their own, which is totally fine. This is a very brief activity. And in these breakout rooms, you will work with your group mates or individually on an allocated theme around this idea of boosting immunity, which is very popular nowadays, especially in social media. And your group your group number is defined by your breakout room number. So breakout number 1 is group number 1, etc. And you will be provided with an article on immunity boosting, which contains 10 corresponding themes. And in your group or individually, you will need to read your allocated short article section. So, for example, group number 1 in breakout room 1 will read about diet and so on. And you will need to find 4 examples of scientific observations from your theme on immunity boosting. And one group, group 10, as you can see, will find 4 examples against boosting. You will have 5 minutes to read your section and agree with your group members on the 4 answers if you're in a group. And you will then type these answers up on a pre-designed mind map, and I will put the link in the chat in a second. You will then select a speaker for your group, who will present the answers to the rest of us in the main room. In case you need a quick reminder, the activity instructions together with the article underneath the instructions and the mind map link will be in the chat as well. So you will soon be sent by Uwe to one of the breakout rooms, and you will automatically return after 5 minutes. I will now paste the link to the activities, in the chat. How do I go back? Here. So hopefully you've got it in the chat now, and I'll also include that the file with articles also in the chat. Hopefully all of you can access it now. Please let me know if there is any issue. I think all of us are back now. Thank you so much to those of you who participated in the activity. I appreciate we haven't got a group big enough to perhaps fill in all the themes, but I hope you got a fairly good idea of what this mind map activity would look like if you had a bigger cohort. We typically do it with a cohort of 35 plus. So this works really well. And as you can see, it's not extremely complicated. So this would typically be something that we would do on day 1. So in that way, students can do a little bit of a collaborative work on day 1 before they get to know each other a little bit better. And it's really a very safe sort of a low-key activity, so students don't need to prove anything or don't necessarily need to have any previous knowledge, so they feel usually quite relaxed about this activity, and they can get to know each other professionally a little bit more, a little bit better compared to what they would do in a normal icebreaker, where they would just talk about their name and perhaps their background a little bit. So yes, thank you very much, everyone. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
I was say, Maggie, thank you. That's really interesting, and
Thank you.
quite fun and quite straightforward. Initially, I was like, oh, that sounds quite a lot to do in 5 minutes. But actually, when you get in there and you see it's a snippet and it's a nice, short, succinct information that you're looking at, I can really see how students could utilise that in a large lecture theatre. I'm a bit we're a nursing course, so we're going to have up to 250 students in a lecture theatre, but even with that size cohort, I can see how actually this could be quite a nice little exercise for them to get them chatting. So thank you, that's a really nice idea.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, in fact, we developed this activity when the pandemic started. So we had all our students online, and it actually worked really well, in particular with the breakout rooms, but you can easily do it as well in a room.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, and I think the trick is to make the document accessible to everyone. We tried that in class teams, and if students logged in as a guest or not with their credentials, they didn't have access to it.
That's right. Yeah, so troubleshooting is always a joy.
Peter, you have your hands up.
Yeah, just a quick comment, because I used a lot of concept mapping tools over the years, because I found that most mind map programs, you're stuck with the spider diagram of everything coming out of the center, and sometimes you want more flexible diagram, and sometimes you actually want to specify the links between the bits of the diagram. And I use a program called CMap, which is free. I'll put this in the chat. And I think it's worth providing students with exercises that look at different tools, concept mapping, mind mapping, because you find some students really take to them, particularly if you're introducing it at the start of the course, like this session is, because then they can use it for all sorts of other purposes.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Peter. And in fact, we haven't considered concept mapping before, but it's a good idea. And we might be able to even modify this mind map into a concept map as a further sort of development of this particular activity. So that's a very good point. Thank you. I can see there is a comment made by David that they actually ended up chatting, which is great. It's always quite nice when students interact, especially early on, and get to know each other. They get that sense of belonging and community. There's also a question: would you provide the text in advance of the session? I'm just wondering about accessibility English language from Viv. Thank you so much for asking. Yes, it's a very good point. In fact, we have quite a few students with special learning needs. We tend to provide all our activities in advance in their learning environment. In our case, that's in Sendy. Because this is a first day activity, I'm not sure how many students would have checked their Sendy account before joining the session, but certainly we would make accommodations for students with special learning needs for accessibility.
Yes, you got a comment from Avis. Lucid chart is very good for intelligent diagramming and not limited to information coming from one shape.
That sounds great. Thank you.
I think some of the mind mapping tools do that as well. You create the mind map as you go about it.
Yeah, definitely. This is something to explore and some interesting activities to develop off of that. Thank you. And
Peter recommended CMap as a free concept mapping tool as well. Perfect. And Myro is there as well. Yeah. There's a nice link between your presentation and Rebecca. So part of a writing approach is that you do a kind of brain dump. So and then you outline. So you do the mind mapping, just put everything on the page what you want to talk about, and then the next stage is you put an order in it. And if you use a tool like this, you can actually create the order within the tool, the outlining, before you then start to write against those different things. But it's just one technique.
I was thinking about that as well, and I run a module in the third year where they come up with their own idea for service improvements. That's a project module, and I really like the idea of the CMAP that you shared, Peter, to ask them to, in their first session, introductory session for that module, start thinking about how they can come up with an idea and develop that further. So yeah, this session's been great for me. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Rebecca, and for me.
Put the link in the chat. So have a go.
Thank you.
If you want to, actually, I just checked. There's a presentation I put on the National Teaching Repository a couple of years ago about it. So if you want to have a look at that, there's examples. So if you look for me on the National Teaching Repository, you'll find a PowerPoint presentation with lots of with lots of examples, because you can use it for diagrams and all sorts, which is one of the reasons why, because you can format it as well. So you can actually, you're not stuck with one kind of format.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it takes 5 minutes to teach people to use it as well. That's the real downside to it. It takes all of 5 minutes to get people using it.
That's awesome.
Right.